In the world of live television, control is everything. Networks meticulously plan their programming, hosts are briefed, and every segment is scheduled down to the second. But there are moments when all that control slips away, and the unfiltered truth erupts on screen for millions to witness. Such a moment happened when Fox News found itself grappling with a live broadcast that suddenly spiraled beyond its grasp. The network, long recognized for steering conversations with sharp precision and carefully chosen narratives, encountered something it could not fully contain, a surge of breaking developments that directly involved Donald Trump, accompanied by raw, unplanned reactions that left anchors and guests visibly unsettled. Viewers tuned in expecting the usual firm grip on messaging but instead saw cracks widen, as hosts scrambled to redirect conversations, cut off commentators, and fill awkward silences that revealed more than the words being spoken. The power of Fox News has always rested in its ability to frame stories in a way that reinforces certain viewpoints and shields figures like Trump from the harshest scrutiny. For years, the network has cultivated an image of control, where hosts can confidently lead discussions and shift narratives in real time. Yet, when the awful news surrounding Trump broke live, that sense of command slipped. Instead of smooth transitions and confident commentary, there was hesitation, voices overlapping, and attempts to pivot away from the topic that only made the loss of control more obvious. Every time a guest tried to address the seriousness of the news, interruptions came swiftly, and yet the urgency of the moment was too big to ignore. It was as if the usual defenses had crumbled, leaving the network vulnerable before its own audience. Part of what made this moment so gripping was the visible clash between the anchors, contributors, and the reality of the news being delivered. Live television has a way of magnifying discomfort, and that discomfort was palpable. Body language shifted, the hosts who usually exuded confidence suddenly glanced nervously at each other, unsure of how to steer the conversation without letting the story dominate. Producers scrambled behind the scenes, cutting between shots, bringing in new voices, and shifting graphics on the screen, yet the overall impression was not of authority but of panic. It was a rare look behind the curtain at how tightly managed messaging can fall apart when reality intrudes with undeniable force. For many viewers, this broadcast was a revelation. They witnessed not only the bad news for Trump but also the struggle of a network that has long aligned itself with him to process that news live and in real time. The anchor's attempts to contain the fallout seemed more frantic with each passing minute. Guests who dared to speak candidly were either interrupted or abruptly shifted off screen, but even these efforts could not disguise the cracks. In fact, those abrupt pivots only highlighted the tension further, leaving audiences with the impression of a network fighting desperately to keep control of something uncontrollable. The psychology of live television is unforgiving. Unlike print or even pre-recorded interviews, there is no time to edit, no chance to polish, no way to take back what has been said. Once the words are out, they linger in the air and reverberate across social media almost instantly. This is exactly what happened in this instance. Clips of the awkward exchanges began circulating online within minutes, with viewers dissecting every moment where Fox tried and failed to steer the narrative. Memes, commentary, and hashtags spread across platforms, turning the broadcast into not just a television event but a viral phenomenon. What began as a single news segment soon transformed into a case study in how even the most experienced networks can lose their footing when the news is too big, too raw, and too disruptive. The significance of this loss of control extends beyond just one moment of television. It speaks to the fragility of media influence when faced with undeniable truths. Fox News, for so long a master at framing events, was forced to confront the limits of its own power. The fact that the story involved Trump made it even more explosive. For years, the network had been his shield, amplifying his message and defending him from critics. But here, live on air, the cracks showed, and the armor looked weaker than ever. The inability to fully control the narrative in real time demonstrated to viewers that even the most loyal platforms can falter when confronted with reality that cannot be spun away. This breakdown in control also revealed the high stakes of media loyalty. When a network aligns itself too closely with a single figure or ideology, it risks being blindsided when events take an unexpected turn. The anchor's visible discomfort was not just about the news itself but about what it meant for the network's credibility and relationship with its audience. Should they confront the reality head-on and risk alienating loyal viewers, or should they attempt to deflect and risk appearing dishonest or out of touch? That tension played out live in real time, and it was impossible to hide. As the segment continued, the struggle to maintain composure grew more evident. There were long pauses where usually confident hosts stumbled over words, moments where the studio fell into uncomfortable silence before someone awkwardly shifted topics, and instances where guests' remarks were cut short mid-sentence. Each of these slips added to the sense of unraveling. For a network built on the projection of authority, these lapses were striking. They revealed that even the strongest facade can falter when hit with a force it cannot anticipate or control. The audience response to this broadcast was mixed but intense. Loyal supporters of Trump and the network expressed frustration, demanding to know why the anchors seemed hesitant or why they allowed the bad news to dominate the screen. Others, particularly critics of both Fox and Trump, seized on the moment as proof that the walls were finally cracking. The clash of reactions only amplified the reach of the broadcast, drawing more attention to the very loss of control Fox had tried to prevent. What was intended to be just another segment became a national talking point, dissected by commentators across the spectrum. In the end, what makes this moment so unforgettable is not just the bad news about Trump but the way it exposed the vulnerability of Fox News itself. A network that has built its brand on dominance and authority was suddenly caught in the chaos of live television, revealing its human side, uncertain, flustered, and scrambling to hold on. This unraveling on air served as a reminder that control is never absolute, and in the high-pressure environment of live broadcasting, the truth has a way of breaking through no matter how hard anyone tries to suppress it. The awful news that landed in Donald Trump's lap during this broadcast was not just another headline but a seismic jolt that reverberated across political, legal, and media landscapes all at once. It carried the weight of consequence, piercing through the carefully built defenses and striking at the very image he has cultivated for years. For a figure who has thrived on projecting strength, control, and inevitability, receiving such devastating news on live television was more than a political setback. It was a public unraveling, magnified by the immediacy of the cameras and the reactions of those around him. The timing made it impossible to prepare a polished response or spin the narrative before it reached millions of viewers. Instead, the shock was raw, the reality unfiltered, and the sense of vulnerability undeniable. For years, Trump has managed to frame bad news as attacks, witch hunts, or political theater, often relying on his allies in media to cushion the blow. But this moment was different. The anchors themselves struggled with the gravity of what was unfolding, their hesitation betraying the seriousness of the development. No matter how much effort was made to downplay or redirect, the weight of the story pushed its way through. It was not simply about the content of the news but about the symbolic blow it represented. To watch Trump receive such news in this way was to witness a crack in the armor of invincibility that has long been central to his brand. The audience, too, felt the magnitude. Supporters who tuned in expecting reassurance were instead confronted with the reality that not everything could be brushed off as bias or spin. The silence in the studio, the faltering words of the hosts, and the sheer shock of the delivery combined to make the moment feel bigger than politics. It was a rare instance where Trump's challenges were not packaged neatly as part of his ongoing battles with the establishment, but instead landed with a finality that seemed to pierce through those defenses. The awful news was not just about an event, it was about the symbolic collapse of the illusion of total control. The impact of receiving such news live cannot be overstated. It strips away the possibility of carefully crafted responses, denying the chance to rally surrogates or prepare counternarratives. For a man who thrives on dominating the conversation, the inability to immediately shape the narrative left him exposed in a way that few had ever seen before. The image of Trump blindsided, paired with the visible unease of those tasked with reporting it, created a powerful spectacle that captured the attention of both his critics and supporters alike. It became not just a piece of news but a cultural moment, dissected in real time across social media and replayed endlessly in the days that followed. The significance of the awful news also lies in what it revealed about the shifting landscape around Trump. In the past, stories damaging to him could often be tempered by loyal defenders who sought to reframe them as victories in disguise. But here, the sheer scale of the revelation made such reframing nearly impossible. The news was bad enough, and the setting, broadcast live in front of millions, amplified its sting. Instead of rallying confidence, it introduced doubt. Doubt among his base, doubt among his allies, and doubt about the strength of his once seemingly unshakable political machinery. For Trump himself, the personal dimension of the moment added another layer. Much of his political identity is built on the image of being untouchable, a fighter who always comes out on top. Awful news of this magnitude threatens that very foundation. It forces a confrontation not just with political rivals but with the perception of weakness, something Trump has always worked tirelessly to avoid. To his supporters, he has always been the figure who refuses to bow, who frames setbacks as fuel for future victories. But watching him face devastating developments in such a vulnerable setting broke through that narrative in ways words alone could not undo. The ripple effects of that moment extended beyond the immediate broadcast. Allies were left scrambling to issue statements, surrogates rushed to offer counterarguments, and sympathetic media outlets sought to reframe the narrative after the fact. Yet none of that could erase the initial impact of the live broadcast. Once the image of Trump reacting to such news was seared into the public consciousness, it became a reference point, a moment that critics could highlight and supporters could not easily dismiss. It served as proof that even the most carefully managed personas are susceptible to collapse when confronted with undeniable truth in real time. What made the news so awful was not only its content but the context in which it arrived. The drama of live television added a layer of exposure that no written article or delayed announcement could match. Watching Trump's allies stumble, watching anchors falter, and watching the story break uncontrollably created a sense of authenticity that viewers could not ignore. There was no script, no rehearsal, and no spin strong enough to mask the reality. The moment was raw, and that rawness gave it power. Even for critics of Trump, the scene carried a strange sense of gravity. Many had long awaited a moment when bad news would pierce his shield, but the way it happened, suddenly, publicly, and inescapably, added an intensity that exceeded expectations. It was not the slow drip of scandal or the carefully worded court documents that usually dominate the headlines. It was a sharp, visible shock that felt like a turning point. That is why so many viewers, regardless of their politics, recognized the gravity of the broadcast. It was not just information being delivered, it was history unfolding in real time. The symbolic weight of Trump getting such awful news on live television will linger long after the specific details fade. It encapsulates the vulnerability of political figures who rely heavily on control, image, and narrative. It also underscores the risk of living in the constant spotlight, where one cannot always control the flow of information or the timing of revelations. For Trump, the moment represented more than a setback. It was a glimpse into how fragile even the strongest political brands can become when struck at the right moment. That is why this moment was more than just news. It was a spectacle that exposed weakness, highlighted vulnerability, and showed millions that even figures who appear untouchable can be shaken. The awful news itself was bad enough, but the way it landed, live, raw, and unfiltered, gave it a resonance that ensured it would not simply pass as another headline in the endless churn of political coverage. The collision between media, power, and exposure has always been a defining feature of American politics, but rarely is it put on display as clearly as it was during this live broadcast. In one unforgettable segment, the balance of influence shifted before the eyes of millions. As Fox News struggled to maintain control, Trump was struck with awful news, and the mechanics of media manipulation were laid bare. This was more than just a political story or another television headline. It was a vivid reminder of how fragile the relationship between powerful figures and their media allies can be when confronted with the unpredictable force of live television. In that moment, the intricate machinery that usually shields Trump faltered, and the audience saw the raw intersection of politics and press exposed in its truest form. For decades, the media has played a crucial role in shaping narratives around political leaders, deciding which stories to amplify and which to bury. In Trump's case, Fox News has often served as both a megaphone and a shield, giving him a platform to rally supporters while protecting him from the harshest scrutiny. This symbiotic relationship benefited both sides. Trump gained legitimacy and influence through favorable coverage, while Fox secured ratings and loyalty from his passionate base. But what became clear during this chaotic moment was that such relationships are inherently unstable. When the awful news broke live on air, the network's loyalty clashed with its responsibility to deliver breaking information, and the result was a messy unraveling of the delicate balance they had long maintained. Exposure is the great equalizer. No matter how powerful a politician may be or how loyal a network is to them, live television allows for little room to maneuver when reality intervenes. In this case, the exposure of Trump's vulnerability was amplified by the visible discomfort of the anchors and commentators. Each attempt to redirect the conversation or soften the blow only reinforced the fact that something damaging had occurred. The network's effort to control the story made the story itself even bigger, showing viewers that not even Trump's closest media allies could spin their way out of the truth in real time. It was a moment of authenticity born out of chaos, and authenticity is often more powerful than carefully scripted messaging. The power dynamics at play were striking. Trump has long positioned himself as a figure who bends media coverage to his will, often attacking unfavorable outlets while praising those who cater to his narrative. Yet in this moment, the roles were reversed. The story dictated the coverage, not Trump's spin. The media, even one of his most supportive outlets, could not shield him from the gravity of the situation. For someone who thrives on projecting dominance, the inability to control the narrative underscored a rare moment of weakness. It revealed how power is not absolute, and how quickly it can be challenged when the machinery of media control malfunctions in front of millions. This exposure also carried implications beyond Trump and Fox News. It raised questions about the broader relationship between politicians and the press, and how far media outlets are willing to go in protecting their chosen figures. When loyalty clashes with journalistic duty, the cracks become visible, and the credibility of both sides suffers. Viewers who witnessed this moment saw not just Trump's vulnerability but also the network's struggle to reconcile its role as both a supporter and a source of news. That tension, played out live on television, highlighted the fragile nature of media influence and the dangers of tying it too closely to any one political figure. What makes live television so powerful is its immediacy. There are no edits, no do-overs, no chance to carefully craft a narrative after the fact. This rawness exposes not only the subjects of the news but also those delivering it. The anchor's hesitation, the awkward silences, the overlapping voices, all of it told a story that went beyond the words being spoken. It was a story of panic, of scrambling for control, of realizing that the usual playbook would not work in that moment. The exposure was not just Trump's, it was Fox News's as well. Both sides found themselves vulnerable, and that shared vulnerability created an unforgettable spectacle. The ripple effects were immediate. Clips of the broadcast spread rapidly across social media, where audiences dissected every pause, every deflection, every uncomfortable glance. Critics saw it as proof that Trump's grip on media allies was weakening, while supporters struggled to reconcile the image of their champion facing such devastating news without the usual buffer of confident spin. The exposure of this vulnerability extended far beyond the television screen, fueling debates about the role of the press in shaping political reality and whether loyalty to a single figure can withstand the pressure of undeniable truth. At its core, this moment revealed the limits of power. Trump's political brand has always rested on the image of dominance, resilience, and control, while Fox News's brand has thrived on projecting authority and certainty to its viewers. Yet both were shaken by a single broadcast that neither could fully contain. The exposure of Trump's vulnerability chipped away at his aura of invincibility, while the exposure of Fox News's struggle undermined its reputation as a confident, authoritative voice. The convergence of these two losses created a rare moment where both politician and press were revealed to be far more fragile than they appeared. What makes this collision so important is not just the spectacle of watching power falter but the lessons it carries about the nature of media and politics. Power relies on perception, and perception is shaped by exposure. When exposure reveals weakness, the carefully constructed image of power begins to erode. Trump, who has long relied on Fox News to reinforce his image, saw that image threatened in a way that could not be undone by a rally speech or a social media post. And Fox, which has long relied on Trump to secure loyalty from its audience, saw its control unravel in a way that could not be easily explained away. This was a moment where media, power, and exposure converged to create something larger than the sum of its parts. The live broadcast became more than a segment of news, it became a turning point, a reminder that control is never absolute, and that the relationship between politicians and the press is always one revelation away from collapse. It was proof that in the end, no matter how carefully managed the partnership between power and media may seem, exposure remains the force that can shatter illusions and reveal the fragile truth beneath.